I didn't realize something was wrong until my aunt called me and said the exact same words as my parents. Same concern, same tone, same pause before calling me unstable. That's when it hit me. This wasn't worry, it was coordination. They weren't asking how I felt, they were tracking what I did, who I talked to, who was influencing me. Every time I tried to explain myself, they said I was imagining things. Every time I stayed quiet, they said I was becoming dangerous. And in that moment, I understood something terrifying. I wasn't raised to be loved. I was raised to be convenient. And the second I stopped being convenient, I became the problem. For a long time, I couldn't tell when I was chosen to be the one at fault. As a kid, I thought it was coincidence. If my father came home angry, it meant I had said something wrong. If my mother grew distant, it meant I had disappointed her again. No one ever said it was my fault out loud. It was quieter than that. Looks, pauses, calm sentences. You're smart, you should understand. We just worry about you. I tried to be better. Quieter, easier. I learned to anticipate what they wanted before they asked. Over time, I lost track of what I wanted myself. Every personal desire felt dangerous, like breaking an unspoken rule. When problems came up, the conversation slowly turned toward me. Not accusations, implications, not punishment, disappointment, and I accepted it. Because I was taught that this was what love looked like. But something kept growing inside me. A feeling that I was always being tested by rules that kept changing. As I got older, the rules became tighter. Even though no one ever said them out loud, nothing was directly forbidden. Every decision met the same response. Doubt, silence, a heavy sigh. My father said I wasn't ready yet. My mother reminded me how much they had sacrificed. When I wanted a job, they said it would distract me from my real future. When I mentioned moving out, they asked why I was in such a hurry to abandon them. Every step I took turned into an accusation, disguised as concern. I started feeling guilty before I even acted. Sometimes I thought that if I simply disappeared, their lives would be easier. Those thoughts scared me, and I convinced myself the problem was me. Normal kids didn't think like that. I tried to feel grateful. I repeated their words in my head like a mantra. They know better. They want what's best. But the older I got, the stronger the feeling became. I was living in a narrow hallway, and the walls were slowly closing in. A shift didn't happen during a fight. It was painfully ordinary. During a regular family dinner, my father casually said I should be careful around people who were too nice to me. He sounded calm, almost friendly. My mother immediately agreed, saying I had always been trusting and easy to influence. I realized they were talking about my friends, the first people who listened to me without judgment, who didn't interrupt, who didn't try to fix me. My stomach tightened. I tried to explain that these were normal relationships. My mother looked at me like I had betrayed her. My father went silent and stopped talking altogether. The room filled with tension. Later, my mother said they were just afraid of losing me. And once again, guilt settled in. For having a life outside the house. For breathing easier when I wasn't there. That was the first time I noticed something. Their concern grew strongest whenever I pulled away. After that dinner, things changed. Not suddenly, quietly. My parents started asking more questions about where I went and who I was with. The words sounded caring, but there was suspicion underneath. If I stayed out late, my mother sighed and said she couldn't sleep again. If I didn't reply right away, my father reminded me how dangerous people could be. My friends slowly turned into a problem that needed fixing. Their names were said with doubt, their actions with concern. I was told they were using me, that they wanted something from me, that I was too naive to see it. I noticed I was explaining myself before anyone asked, giving details no one requested. Each time, something heavy tightened inside my chest. I stopped inviting friends over. I stopped sharing plans. Home became a place where I had to be careful, speak less, think faster. And one thought kept returning. My parents weren't interested in me. They were interested in control. And that realization scared me more than any argument. Started noticing how often conversations turned toward me, even when they had nothing to do with me. If my father had trouble at work, my mother glanced in my direction, waiting for a response. If she felt irritated, I was told I had changed. too closed off, too cold. I heard it over and over. It felt like I was being trained for a role I couldn't refuse. I began doubting myself, my memory, my emotions. Sometimes I truly believed I ruined everything. That the house would be calmer without me. In those moments I gave in. I apologized for things I hadn't done. I promised to try harder. And it worked. For a while, my parents softened, became warmer. Then it started again. That's when I understood something else. My guilt was useful to them. It kept me close, obedient, predictable, and the more I realized that, the stronger the urge grew inside me. I wanted out of this game. I just didn't know how yet. After that dinner, things truly changed, though it wasn't immediately obvious. My parents began asking more questions about my plans and friends. Their caring words now carried a hint of suspicion. If I stayed out late, my mother would say she struggled to sleep, and my father would remind me of potential dangers. My friends, once accepted without question, now became subjects of doubt. Their actions were scrutinized, and I heard comments suggesting they might have hidden motives. I started feeling that every move I made was being monitored and judged. My friends stopped coming over, and I shared my thoughts less frequently. Home turned into a place where caution was essential. I found myself increasingly aware that my parents cared more about control than my actual life. This realization brought anxiety, but also a determination to understand what was truly happening. I started noticing small things that once felt random. Some of my messages seemed read, even though I never showed them to anyone. My phone, left on the table, would be slightly out of place later. One day, I came home earlier than usual and found my mother in my room. She flinched, like she'd been caught doing something wrong, and said she was just dusting. There was no cloth in her hands. That was the moment something went cold inside me. Not fear, awareness. I began replaying past years and realized many of my choices were never really mine. The clubs I joined, the people I slowly lost, the opportunities I turned down because it was better this way. Back then I trusted them. Now I saw it clearly. My freedom had been taken in small, quiet pieces. And the worst part was that I helped them do it, believing this was what a normal family looked like. After that day, I became quieter. Not because I gave up, but because I needed to see the full picture. I stopped leaving my phone unattended. I created a new email account no one knew about. Almost immediately, something strange appeared. An email on my old account, a reply to a resume I never sent. It said I was no longer interested and asked them not to contact me again. I stared at the screen as a dull anger spread through my chest. This wasn't random. It was organized. They weren't just controlling me at home. They were closing my exits. That evening at dinner, my father calmly said I shouldn't think about moving out yet. "You're not ready for real life," he added, without looking at me. And that's when it hit me. They weren't afraid I'd leave. They were certain I couldn't. A few days later, my Aunt Marlene called me. We barely spoke before, which made the call unsettling. Her voice was soft, almost caring, but every sentence felt rehearsed. She said my parents were worried about me, that I'd been acting strange, withdrawn, ungrateful, that the family was concerned I was imagining problems. I listened as the ground shifted beneath me. This wasn't a conversation. It was pressure. Later that same day, my cousin messaged me. Almost word for word. That's when I understood. They had talked about me behind my back. They had built a version of me that was unstable, difficult, a problem, a useful label. If I complained, something was wrong with me. If I pushed back, I was ungrateful. And the more I saw it, the clearer it became. I wasn't living in a family. I was trapped inside a carefully written script, and my role was always the same, the one at fault. After those calls, I stopped arguing. I stopped explaining myself. I stayed quiet and watched. That's when I noticed what I'd missed before. My parents weren't interested in me. They were monitoring me. They didn't ask, "How are you?" They asked, "What did you do? Who did you talk to? Who is influencing you?" Any sign of independence triggered irritation. When I said I applied for an internship in another city, my mother went pale. My father smirked and said it was stupid, that I wouldn't handle it. Their voices were calm, almost gentle, but underneath was fear. Not fear for me, fear of losing control. For the first time, a disturbing thought formed. What if they didn't need a son, but an object? Someone to keep close, to shape, to break. And the longer I stayed silent, the more uneasy they became. Silence was eroding their power, and they knew it. They changed tactics. If before it was pressure and control, now it was care. Too sudden, too deliberate. My mother started cooking my favorite meals, leaving notes, asking if I was tired. My father offered rides, asked about my plans. It almost looked normal, but I felt the lie. This wasn't warmth. It was reconciliation on their terms. Like they flicked a switch. I caught my mother whispering to my father, thinking I couldn't hear, that I was becoming dangerous. That word stuck. Dangerous, because I was quiet, because I stopped explaining, because I stopped asking permission. That evening, my father sat across from me and said I had changed, that it worried the family. He said everything they did was for my own good. Then he added that without them, I would be nothing. It sounded like a threat wrapped in concern. That's when I knew. They were not going to let me go. And if I didn't make a move, they would. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay there listening to the house breathe. Footsteps, doors opening and closing softly. At some point, I realized they were checking on me. Not to see if I was okay. To see if I was still there. In the morning, my phone had 3 missed calls from my mother, even though we were in the same house. When I came downstairs, she smiled too quickly and asked where I'd been. I said nowhere. She didn't believe me. My father watched silently, like he was waiting for me to slip. That was when the fear settled in, not panic, calculation. I understood that staying meant escalation. They had already involved the family. Next would be professionals, doctors, help. I wasn't paranoid. I was predictable to them, and predictability made me easy to trap. I started preparing quietly. I gathered documents and hid them in my backpack. I withdrew small amounts of cash so it wouldn't be noticed. I stopped sharing plans entirely. The less they knew, the more anxious they became. My mother asked if I was angry with her. My father warned me not to make irreversible mistakes. One evening, my Aunt Marlene showed up unannounced. She hugged me too tightly and said everyone just wanted me safe. My parents watched closely, like handlers. I realized then how deep it went. This wasn't just my parents, it was a system. A shared agreement about who I was allowed to be. And I was breaking it by thinking for myself. That night, I decided. I wasn't going to announce my leaving. I was going to disappear from the script. I left early in the morning. No note, no goodbye. My hands shook as I closed the door. Halfway down the street, my phone buzzed. Message from my mother asking where I was. Then another. Then my father called. I didn't answer. By the time I reached the bus station, there were messages from relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. Concern, confusion, disappointment. The story had already started spreading. I turned my phone off. For the first time, there was silence that wasn't heavy. It was empty, and that emptiness felt like space. I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I could finally breathe without permission. The weeks that followed were harder than I expected. I doubted every choice. I replayed their voices in my head. But slowly, reality pushed back. I found work. I paid my own bills. I made mistakes and nothing collapsed. No one punished me. No one rewrote my feelings for me. My parents sent one last message saying they hoped I would come to my senses. I didn't reply. I understood something then. They didn't lose me because I left. They lost me when they decided control mattered more than love. I wasn't the problem they built their family around anymore. I was just a person, and that was enough. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel, like it, and click on the bell so you don't miss any more stories. See you soon.